Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Overdose Prevention and Response event. My name's Steve Curry. I am the Director of Public Health for the City of Fitchburg. With us this evening, over in the lobby, we have Gamma, Fitchburg CTC, Restoration Recovery, and an OD2A table. These are all facilities within the City of Fitchburg that offer services and have literature to hand out. So I encourage folks to take a look at that literature and bring home whatever you need to do. On the other side of the lobby, we have free pizza and salad and water. So I encourage folks to help yourself to refreshments and enjoy yourself during the show. First thing I would like to do is I would like to thank our substance abuse coordinator, that's Sue Christensen. She has put this event together. So let's give Sue a little bit of a hand. Next, I would like to jump right into the training. So I would like to first introduce Kim French, one of our street outreach workers, if you wouldn't mind standing, Kim. And then we also have the man of the hour, Keith Barnaby, who's going to give us Narcan training. So take it away, Keith. Come on up.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming out here tonight. I know it's a rainy night, and you guys came out. I appreciate that. I want to thank Steve Curry and Sue Christensen for putting this all together, the pizza, everything here. I want to thank our resource tables for being here, too. I appreciate them coming. They're part of our Fitchburg interagency team, and I'm going to explain a little bit about that in a second. And I also want to thank FATV for putting this on here tonight. They do a great job and a tremendous asset to this city here. I'm going to take just a quick second here. I want to say hello to someone very special who's going to be watching FATV tonight. She's going to be sitting in a recliner in her pajamas, and it's my Nana. Her name is Barbara Lyle. She's a Fitchburg resident. She's 86 years old. She loves what I do for work, and she clips every article in the paper I'm in, and she thinks I'm famous. And not only is she my biggest fan, she's one of my biggest supporters. She organizes clothing donations in the building where she lives. She goes and buys hats and gloves and toothbrushes and toothpastes for me to hand out in the street, and I just think she's amazing. So I thought tonight I wanted to make Nana famous, and so maybe we give a round of applause for my Nana out here. Perfect. So my name is Keith Barnaby. I've been out here for about 8 years now, and I started off I went back to school, went back to college, and shortly thereafter I started working at a local methadone program out here, and I was the case manager for 3 years. I really enjoyed that job. I worked with hundreds of folks out there, but in 2018 I decided I needed to do something different. I just felt like I wanted to try to do something more out here in the folks. So in 2018 I took a position with a company called AIDS Project Worcester. And it's a company out of Worcester, and I was going to be tasked with 3 things. I was going to be relaunching the overdose education Narcan distribution out here in North Worcester County. I was going to be assisting with launching the POST program out here in North County, and I was also going to start doing street outreach. I'm going to explain each one real quick here. Overdose education, Narcan distribution, it's called OEND. This is a pilot program started by the Department of Public Health back in 2007, and this is where I was trained to become a trainer. And as soon as I started doing these trainings, I hit the ground running. And when I say I went everywhere, I literally did. I did over 300 trainings in 3 years. I went to almost every single agency out here in North County multiple times. Sober homes, every one of them. Halfway houses, multiple times. I've done the jail diversion program at the sheriff's station for a number of years now. I've been to hospitals, libraries, high schools, colleges. I even did a Narcan training for the Freemasons out in Worcester. When I tell you I went everywhere, I literally went everywhere. And this is important, and I'm going to explain why. The other thing I was going to do is that POST program, and that stands for Post Overdose Support Team. Another Mass Department of Public Health program, also funded by BSAS. And what that does is basically we respond to overdoses in those cities. Somebody who's overdosed, and try to get them connected into services and treatment if we can, and at least keep them connected after that event. We partnered with Gamma up in Gardner and also several local police departments and did that for the last couple of years here. I've been doing that kind of work. And then the last piece I was tasked out here with doing was starting street outreach out here in North County. And in the first month of doing street outreach, I knew that was the direction I wanted to go in. I just felt like that this is the area I wanted to go in, and I instantly started to make connections on those streets, and I started to earn that trust out there. And I spent the first year really listening. That's all I really did. And when I started out here, really, I had a backpack with some snacks. I had a cooler with drinks. I had a handful of Bomba socks, blankets, and Narcan. That's all I had. And I spent that first year out here just working with the folks out here, trying to listen to them and figure out what's going on and earning that trust. And it's just an important part of that first. By the second year of doing this, I noticed something was happening. I was seeing the same faces in the same places doing the same things. And I think for a long time in this region, street outreach has been a certain way. It was kind of like pretty much one agency out here, going out sporadically, maybe offering a shelter bed, maybe not, but not really making that connection on the street. And this is where it got me thinking. Here I am, I did all these trainings at all these incredible agencies out here, meeting wonderful people doing incredible work, and I'm thinking to myself, why can't I connect the folks right here in the streets with these agencies? And this is exactly what I started to do. And so by the end of that second year, things are starting to move. We applied for grants. Yeah, we got a whole bunch. Every grant we applied for, we got. And there was two that were really kind of changed the game out here for me. One was a transportation grant from UMass Memorial Health Alliance Hospital, which was going to provide transport to detox and residential services throughout North County, which I think is amazing. I got several agencies that have access to it. We use it today on the streets out here to transport folks to detox directly. And the other grant I got was actually through the city, Department of Board of Health with Sue Christensen, to get a storage unit and supplies. And this really kind of elevated my game. And by the second year, by the end of that second year, I'm sorry, shortly thereafter, I was contracted with the Fitchburg Board of Health back in July of 2021. And shortly thereafter, Kim French was contracted with the Board of Health as well. Kim comes with extensive knowledge of just the resources and the connections out here, having spent over a decade in the field out here, and just a great rapport with the folks on the street, just a tremendous addition to my team here. And over the past 2 years, what we've done is build a team, a network of all these agencies out here. And it's now named the Fitchburg Interagency Team, the FIT. And we're all working collectively together, collaboration, because that's key out here, to make accessing services easier. And we utilize strategies such as like warm handoffs and real-time connections. And really, the warm handoffs, if I can get somebody to an agency to get a particular service, and I come in there and I can introduce them to everybody and make them feel comfortable, I find that typically they're going to continue to engage in some of that. Keep going back over there. Oh, we lost the signal? Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so this is really, it's a new approach to doing street outreach services here, and it's a combination of strategies. It's taking a clinical strategy, a harm reduction, and you're going to hear this word again here tonight, harm reduction, and a recovery coaching strategy, kind of putting them all into one. It's okay. And trying to put them all in one to get folks, give them services directly on the streets and get them connected in here. And basically, essentially what we're doing is providing case management to the population in their environment. And we recognize that there's folks out here are in there's 5 stages of change, and I got folks in every one of those stages of change. And everybody kind of moves at different speeds out here, but regardless of where they're at, we help everybody out here. And it's all about connecting. If you can connect with that person, build that trust, and then keep them engaged. And as a result of our efforts, and when I say our, it's not even just Kim and I. It really is a team effort. It's all the agencies out here working with us collectively. And since July of 2021, we've placed 69 folks into detox. We have developed a clothing voucher program through the Salvation Army, another one of our great programs, collaborators out here. And we also have put well over 100 folks into temporary or emergency shelter when the weather gets bad. And we put dozens of folks into permanent housing solutions. And I can tell you that is not something that happens overnight. That is a complete team effort from all our agencies working together to try to make that happen. Some of the other things we got going out here, we connect folks to food stamps, to SNAP, to cash assistance, phones. We do IDs, birth certificates, employment. And we've also, with the introduction of our FIT team out here, we've had 4 resource fairs out here so far. And what's that basically doing? We get all the agencies together, and we're bringing those services, again, right to the street, in the environment, working with the folks out here. So I'm really excited. I feel really good where we're at today, and I feel like we're just getting started. So that's a little bit of how we got to where we are today. And at this time, I'm going to kind of just jump right into the training, and I want to start with that word that I said before, harm reduction, and just talk about that just a little bit here. Some of the ideas of harm reduction, it's, again, person-centered, person-driven. We don't really care what the person isn't willing to do. We care what the person's willing to do and try and explore all these different pathways out there. And really, the goal out here is keep them alive. That's our goal. The longer I keep you alive, the better chance I have. If we lose them to an overdose, we have a 0% chance of recovery, and we know that. And really, 2 philosophies that I use out here on the streets, it's actually 2 of my favorite quotes. And one is, when you're working with people out here, don't treat them the way they may look, act, talk. We treat them the way that we know they can be, and that's what they'll become. And the other philosophy I use out here, too, is people might remember what you said, and they might remember what you did, but they'll never forget the way you make them feel. And that's really the philosophy of harm reduction out here, and working together with the people out here to try to get them connected in. And again, some of our the ideas of the harm reduction. I'm going to give you some strategies that we actually use out here on the streets. Rule number 1, always have Narcan, right? We put lots and lots of Narcan on the streets out here today. Rule number 2, don't ever use alone, right? If you overdose and you're alone, you're just overdosing and you're alone. And really, if that person has to be alone, and folks will isolate for a lot of different reasons out here. Some folks isolate because they don't want people to see the addiction. Sometimes they don't want to share their drugs. They want to hide the drugs. But if they have to be alone, we tell them to put all the Narcan they have in front of them. That's the best chance they have, because if they do overdose and somebody was to walk in, 1, I can connect the dots real quick here. This is probably an overdose. And 2, I'm going to use the Narcan that you left me, right? And so it's some of our strategies out there. And again, this is harm reduction. We cannot make somebody stop using drugs. We can't do that. We don't have that kind of power. But we can give them a safer way to do it and keep them engaged. Better results usually come out of that. Some of the other techniques out here, we always just do tester shots, start slow, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this stuff out here. And, never share equipment, always get tested, that kind of thing. So it gives you an idea of what the harm reduction strategy really looks like here. This next slide I wanted to put in here just to give an update of where we're at as far as numbers go. And I don't like the word statistics, I like the word lives, because that's what it is out here. It's lives lost. And this gives you a little sneak peek of Massachusetts to Worcester County to right here in Fitchburg. And unfortunately, we don't have the numbers for 2021 out yet. We're still waiting for those to come in. But this is a lot of folks out, and this is exactly why we do Narcan trainings out here today. The more people I can have educated, knowing what to do in an overdose, and have Narcan on hand, the better outcomes we may have. My goal is to get that number in Fitchburg down to 0 as close as I can. That's really my goal out here. This is an alarming new statistic, and I don't know if you guys realize, last year we lost over 100,000 people in the United States to an overdose, over 100,000. And now it is now the leading cause of death for 18 to 45-year-olds in this country. And it's nearly twice as many as COVID, car accidents, and cancer and suicide. That's an alarming statistic right there. And this is why, again, we do Narcan trainings. So we don't have to lose any more people out here. So we're going to get into opiates versus opioids and what's the difference. I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding what is the difference between the 2 things. When you talk about opiates, you're going to think natural, right? And a couple examples on the screen there: morphine, codeine, naturally occurring. Man didn't do anything to alter these things, and they're opiates. And if you hear the word opioid, I want you to think of the word synthetic. And if you hear the word synthetic, I want you to think man-made. Man had something to do with this, right? So we got 2 categories: semi-synthetic opioids, Percocet, Vicodin. Heroin is considered a semi-synthetic opioid. And the last category is full synthetic. And 2 examples: it's methadone, and really the word on the street today, it's fentanyl. Fentanyl is in everything out here. Everything we have, sometimes known in the street as Fetty, present in about 93% of all overdoses, and up to 100 times stronger than morphine. And like I said, it's present in every drug out here today. Excuse me. What we know is that it's in all the stimulants out here today. The cocaine, the meth, the crack, fentanyl is now in all those. And I got folks out there. And this makes me really concerned for my stimulant-only users out here, because they don't have any tolerance to that drug, and so it's very, very risky using drugs today. Nobody has any clue what they're buying out there. The number of counterfeit pills on the street today is alarming. I think we're somewhere between 40% to 50% of the pills out here are all counterfeit. And so it looks like the exact same thing. You have dealers pressing these. They look identical. There's fake Adderalls, Perk 30s, Xanax. They're all out here. And that person thinks they're taking something, and it turns out to be fentanyl. And very, very high, risky for an overdose. And really something that's alarming to me, and I've come in contact in the last couple months, actually last month or so, purchasing drugs on the dark web. And I'm actually working with a family right now that's locally in this area, and their son has actually been purchasing what he thinks are Perk 30s on the internet. And he's getting delivered right to his house. But it's not Perk 30s, and it's not an opioid. It's actually methamphetamine that he's been getting. And we know that because we tested him, and we figured out that's where he's buying these drugs. But again, just giving you an idea, where these drugs are everywhere. They're all over the place, but the dark web. And it's really scary because you think about like somebody from like the recreational user to the experimental user who might just think, I'm going to do a little cocaine here, and there's fentanyl in the cocaine and the overdose. You could see in the news just recently, 2 examples. West Point Academy, 5 cadets overdosed in a weekend because they all thought they were doing something and it turned out to be fentanyl. In Worcester, 2 police officers off duty did a line of cocaine, and they both overdosed. I mean, this just shows you, and nobody's safe. You're not safe. This can happen to anybody, anywhere, from the active user today, daily user, to the experimenter, to the recreational. So fentanyl, very, very dangerous stuff here. Lots of ways folks use the drug out here. I call it the 4 S's. You could shoot it, snort it, swallow it, smoke it. What I want you to remember is that at any one of these methods of administration, they're at risk of an overdose. That time when I worked in the methadone program, I had lots of folks up there, and I'd meet with them, and they'd say, Keith, I don't got to worry about overdosing. I just sniff a little bit, or I just smoke some pills. It's just a myth. And we've lost thousands of folks to every single one of those methods out there. And so I'm going to try to explain what actually happens in an overdose, and just give you a real simple way of looking at it. No matter which way that person decides to use, what's going to happen is those opiate or opioid molecules are going to travel to their brain. And you see that little purple thing on the screen up there? That's an opioid receptor. Everybody has opioid receptors in their brain. We all have them. And those molecules will attach to that receptor. And the short version of that story is that's what gives that person the desired effect. It hits the receptor, hits the spinal cord, hits the central nervous system and the respiratory system, and boom, that's where they're trying to get. The problem with this is that these opioid receptors, they do lots of things. But one of their primary functions is that they control and regulate your breathing. They control how you breathe. And so somebody who maybe takes a large amount, or the way it is out here today, a very tiny bit of a very hot batch, and you can instantly suppress your respiratory system. That leads to a lack of oxygen. And we all know that a lack of oxygen, bad things are going to happen. You can develop brain damage in as little as 5 minutes. And really, the real way to think about this is, the longer your brain does not get oxygen, after a certain amount of time, your brain will tell your heart to stop beating. And this is exactly what's happening in an overdose. It's all about a lack of oxygen. And so just another way of kind of looking at what's going on during that overdose. Some of the top risk factors for an overdose, these are the top 3. I'm going to break them down real quick here, each one. The number 1 risk factor is tolerance. And tolerance, all that means is that's how that person's body tolerates the drug. And so somebody who uses on a daily basis tends to build a very high tolerance. But if they stop using for just 2 days, that tolerance level will drop down. And the lower the tolerance, the more at risk of an overdose. So you think about folks here, I got lots of folks maybe get incarcerated for a little bit, and maybe they went in doing a certain amount, and if they get released and they start to pick up right where they left off, it's almost inevitable that they're probably going to overdose here. Folks starting out in MAT, Medicaid Assisted Treatment, this is your methadone, Suboxone programs out here. When I worked at my program here, every Tuesday was intake day, 5:30 a.m. You wanted to get on the program, you showed up. And folks would, but they're coming straight out of active addiction. And so here you got folks trying to stop using, now they're on methadone, and so we pay very, very close attention to those folks because, again, their drug use is going to slow down a little bit because of the methadone, but now the tolerance level drops a little bit too. So if they continue to have slips, they're at risk of that overdose. And really, individuals in early recovery, this is kind of near and dear to my heart, and this is why I spent a lot of time going to all the halfway homes, all the sober homes, multiple times, usually 2 or 3 times a year because they rotate through clients. Because this is what breaks my heart, is that you got men and women out here that are trying to change their life, trying to do the right thing, and they do good for a while, but on one day, they made a bad choice, and then we lose them. And I think that's just heartbreaking out here. So it's very important for me to get into these houses. I want to make sure they got tons of Narcan. I want to make sure they know what they're doing in there if something happens in an overdose so that we can keep folks alive, basically here. Those other 2 risk factors, prior overdoses and polysubstance use. Prior overdose, every time they have an overdose, they're more susceptible to continue having overdoses and more susceptible to a fatal overdose in the future. And really, it's because damaging some of the organs, you're damaging the opioid receptors. And I'll give you an example. There's actually a sober home in the area that I go to all the time. And when I do these trainings for OEND program, I have to ask them a lot of questions. We collect data. And one of the questions we ask is, how many overdoses have you had in the past? And this gentleman's answer was 27. This is a lot of overdoses. I did the training, loaded the house with Narcan. I got a call 3 days later. He slipped, number 28. And when I was talking with him, he even told me, Keith, every time I use, I go out, meaning he overdoses, every single time. And it just shows you, like, the damage that has been caused from all those overdoses. And then the last risk factor is that polysubstance use, and that's really just a fancy way of saying mixing all these drugs together. And the 3 drugs that I don't like to see mixed together, it's fentanyl, benzos, and alcohol. For those who don't know what benzos are, benzodiazepines, often prescribed for things like PTSD, depression, anxiety, things like Xanax, Ativans. What makes this a deadly mix is that all 3 things are going to do the same. They're going to suppress your respiratory system. They're just doing it in different ways. And again, nobody knows what they're buying out here on the street today. Nobody knows. And it could be anything in it. Most times with the fentanyl out here today, it's often cut with cocaine. The cocaine, it enhances that initial effect, the initial rush, and that's why it's added to the cocaine. But really, just scary, scary stuff to be playing around with out here. Mass Department of Public Health will define a drug overdose as a person who is unresponsive and has reduced or stopped breathing. That is the Mass Department of Public Health definition of that. So what I want to do is give you 2 scenarios and what we might do in each scenario to best help that person. So first scenario, let's say that we walked into this building tonight. We saw a gentleman on the ground. We don't even know his name. We don't even know if this guy uses illicit drugs. All we know is that he's in trouble. So I want to approach him. And again, the faster we can assess, the faster we can react. And so as I'm approaching that person, I'm taking a look around. First thing I'm looking for is paraphernalia. If you find paraphernalia there, more than likely this is a drug-related event, and you can connect those dots very, very quickly. You won't always see paraphernalia. It's not always there, but if you do, good sign. As I get closer to that person, I'm going to look at the color of their skin. They'll have a complete lack of pigmentation. And we find that somebody with a lighter complexion tend to be white or blue color, and somebody with a darker complexion may be like ash or gray color. You could be any one of those or all 3. You could be usually they're sweaty, clammy to the touch. They could be sweating profusely. And if the eyes are open, I'm going to look at those pupils. They'll be very small. We call it pinned out. And a real good clue that this might be an overdose, it's lips and fingertips, dark blue, purple. And the reason for this is because the respiratory system's slowing down, and now the circulatory system's slowing down, and the blood is starting to collect in the lips and the fingertips. So if you look at the box on the side there, it gives you a real indication. There is a very fine line between being really high and overdose. It's very, very thin, and folks can kind of go back and forth on that. So I want to teach you ways how to assess that person quickly so we can try to help that person as fast as we can here. So as we get to that person, we got them on the ground here. We're trying to figure out what's going on. I'm going to do 2 types of stimulation. And the first one's verbal, just the way it sounds. I'm going to talk real, real loud. I'm going to use words like 911 and Narcan. It's probably going to sound like this. Hey, are you all right? I'm going to call 911. I have Narcan. I'm going to Narcan you. I like to say Narcan twice, because anybody using illicit drugs does not want to hear those 2 words out here. And what I'm hoping for is that he says, no, I'm all set. Jumps right up. I'm okay with that. He's not overdosing. He's okay. But let's say, I'm looking for any indication he's hearing my voice. And let's say we don't get nothing back on the verbal. Excuse me. We go right to a physical stimulation. And it's going to be the sternal rub. And you get to see the slide up there. It's right where the breastbone meets. I'm going to take my knuckles just like this, and I'm going to rub up and down, hard and fast. And I'm looking for any indication that he can feel what I'm doing. I'm hoping he says, ouch, stop, quit it, who are you, what are you doing? Again, he's not overdosing. If I do both these stimulations and I get nothing back, then I've already assessed him. He is unresponsive. All right? Let's go to the second half of that definition from Mass Department of Public Health. Unresponsive, reduced or stopped breathing. We know what's happening in an overdose. It's a lack of oxygen. And so I want to try to assess this person to see where he's at. So what I'm going to do is one move, but I'll do three things at the same time. I'm going to take my ear, put it right down to his nose. I'll actually touch his nose to my ear. And I'm going to look, listen, feel. All right, so I got my ear down like this. I'm looking down his chest. I'm looking for the chest to rise. Clear indication this person's breathing. I'm going to listen. A lot of times those molecules hit the receptor in the brain, suppresses the respiratory system, and now he's struggling to breathe. And it could be kind of a snoring, a wheezing, a gargling kind of noise. And the last thing I'm going to try to do is feel air come out of his nose and touch my ear. And what I'm looking for, I need him to take at least a minimum of one breath every 5 to 10 seconds. That's a minimum. All right? Let's say that this person that we're talking about in this first scenario is taking one breath every 5 to 10 seconds. I've already assessed him. He's unresponsive and has reduced breathing. Anybody know what the first thing I'm going to do is? What's that? 911, that's right. We want to get that call in right away. But again, we don't know how long he's been in this state. We don't know how long he's been like this. So I want to get that call in right away. And you hear folks say this all the time. Call 911. I think we got to do better than that. Call 911. Tell them we got a male down who's unresponsive and has reduced breathing. Give them a little bit more and scream that out. If you got multiple people on the scene, that's what we want to do. And what's really key here is your location. I grew up in this area, born and raised, and I think of a lot of places out here like Meadowbrook Village, Riverside Village, Litchfield Terrace in Leominster, Central Village in Leominster. These are like condos, and they all look the same. You can get lost in there. If you have somebody else that's on the scene, send them outside. They can wait and flag that person down. Again, trying to get 911 there as fast as we can. And again, you don't have to mention drugs at this point. You don't have to say anything about drugs on that call. It's really irrelevant almost. They're unresponsive and have reduced breathing. 911 is going to come every single time. So for this gentleman here, we're going to call 911, get that call going right away. And I just happen to have Narcan on me. And at this point, I want to give him Narcan. I want to talk about Narcan for a couple seconds here. Narcan is the brand name. The drug name is naloxone. And it's what's known as a true antidote. And what that means is the only thing the Narcan will do is reverse an opioid overdose. That's it. It's going to do nothing for a person overdosing on, say, cocaine, methamphetamine, alcohol, benzos. It's going to do nothing for them. In fact, if I give them Narcan and they're not in an opioid overdose, it's going to have zero effect on them whatsoever. There's no adverse side effects to Narcan. It's safe for everybody to be administered. Safe for men, women, children. Pregnant women can be administered Narcan. These are the newer Narcans. You can tell it has the red plunger on it, and they have a longer shelf life, which I like. The old ones used to last about 1.5 years. Now they're up to 2-3 years, over 3 years before they expire. And even if a Narcan was expired and that's all you had, you could still use it. It's not going to hurt them. It might actually work, but if that's all you had. And again, with these newer ones here, what they did is all they did was add a preservative. Okay, it's still same 4 milligrams, single-step Narcans. This thing's ready to go when you are, but the temperature range has expanded. So it used to be keeping your Narcan in an optimal setting was 59 to 77 degrees. You could go you can go lower or higher, but you didn't want to do it for a long period of time. The newer Narcans now go anywhere from 5 degrees above zero all the way to 104 for a longer period of times. And in fact, these Narcans could actually be frozen. If they're outside and they freeze, you could thaw it out at room temperature for 12 minutes, and it will not lose its efficacy, which I think is incredible because what we're doing out here, certainly with the folks I have out here who are on the street, who are actively using, I want to keep that Narcan. I want them loaded with Narcan, and I want that Narcan to stay with them. And it gets pretty cold out here sometimes, so I kind of like what they did with the new Narcans. The way the Narcan works, after we administer it to that person, it's going to absorb through the mucous membranes, it's going to travel to the brain, and it's going to find those opioid receptors with the molecules. It's going to knock off the molecules and attach to that receptor. This usually results in that person becoming responsive and the breathing returning back to normal. What's important to remember about Narcan is it only lasts 30 to 90 minutes. That's it. So you administer Narcan, it knocks the molecules off the receptor, but it doesn't flush them, right? They're not going away. They're in the brain. They're just kind of swimming around in there, and what they're doing is waiting for the Narcan to wear off. And when it does, they will then try to bind back to those same receptors, which could result in that person going back into an overdose. And again, a lot of times these overdoses happen. Sometimes 911's called, sometimes they're not. Sometimes 911 is called, and about 33% of the time, folks refuse to go to the hospital. And so if that was the case, you'd want to stay with that person as long as you could. Should they go back into an overdose, we want to be there to protect them, keep them safe. So that's how the Narcan works. How to administer Narcan could not be any simpler. It is a piece of cake. If I was going to train you on that, we would have been done 20 minutes ago. And the way to remember it, peel, place, push, right? So you get your Narcan like this. They all have foils on the back side. We're going to peel the foil off. That's your first P. Box number 1. Box number 2, how are you going to hold it? You got your 2 fingers up top. You got your thumb on the plunger here. The box number 3, I don't necessarily like that picture, but I couldn't find a better one. I want to tilt the head back slightly. 1, it makes a nice angle, right? You're going to administer it into that person's nostril. And you tilt the head back, it goes in real nice. And 2, I need the Narcan to sit in the nose for about 2 to 3 seconds so it can start to absorb through those mucous membranes. And so I kind of got gravity working in my favor at the same time. And that last P, push. That's all I'm going to do. When I do that, a little mist is going to shoot out of here. Narcan's going to go in and start doing what it's supposed to do. Narcan can work as little as 5 minutes. It could take 30 seconds, as little as 30 seconds, but it could take up to 5 minutes for a Narcan. And we want to try to wait 3 minutes before we administer a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth Narcan. And the reason we do that is because Narcan puts somebody in complete withdrawals. It's pretty intense. And the whole reason that the person is typically using is to not be in withdrawals. But if we give too much Narcan too fast, we are going to intensify those withdrawals, and we certainly don't want to make it worse for the person experiencing the overdose. So we try to wait 3 minutes. This is not easy to do. Certainly if this is a friend or a loved one, your adrenaline is pumping. You're doing everything you can. You just want them to come back. And so you do your best on that 3 minutes. 3 minutes goes by, and during those 3 minutes, too, by the way, we want to monitor the breathing. Like if this person here was to dip down below that 1 breath every 5 to 10 seconds, I'm going to do something different. So 3 minutes goes by, and he's still taking 1 breath every 5 to 10 seconds, still not responding. Second Narcan's going to go in, peel, place, push, except I'm going to do the other nostril. And I'm going to continue to do this until that person becomes responsive. I run out of Narcan, or until 911 shows up. And again, how many Narcans it takes, it's always different out here. I just had a report this week. There was an overdose, and it took 5 Narcans. 5. And sometimes I've seen as little as 1. Right? There's a lot of factors that go into how many Narcans might take to bring this person back. But that's our best case scenario. We walk in, we quickly assess them. I had Narcan on me, everything worked out great. I'm going to give you another scenario now. Similar scenario, same building, same person's on the ground here, but and this time we have no Narcan on hand. So I'm going to assess the scene real quick here. I'm going to do a verbal and physical stimulation. I got nothing. He's unresponsive. I'm going to go down and check his breathing, look, listen, feel, except this time he's not breathing. And to boot, I got no Narcan on me. First things first, I'm going to call 911. Okay? And at this point, I'm going to call 911. I want to start doing rescue breathing. Rescue breathing is the most effective thing you could do for somebody experiencing an overdose who is not breathing. And the reason for that is because, just like we said before, if I get oxygen to the brain tells the heart to keep beating. You know, I could basically keep this kid going until 911 got here. I know they got Narcan. And again, I'm going to greatly increase his chances of survival and greatly decrease his chances of having any irreversible damage. And that's from a lack of oxygen, brain damage, or body and organ damage. And again, to do rescue breathing is super simple. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to tilt that person's head all the way back. I want to open up that airway to the maximum amount. I want to do a real good mouth check. You got to look at people's mouths who overdose. Find lots of objects in people's mouths who overdose out here. The last thing you want to do is blow air in his mouth, take any object that's in there and force it into their windpipe or lungs, because we're going to have big, big problems then. So I'm going to do a real good mouth check. I say check down on the gum lines too sometimes. We find things in there. Tilt that head back. I'm going to take one hand. I'm going to squeeze his nose real, real tight. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to go down, make a good seal with my mouth, and blow that air in. I want you to think of it as like blowing a balloon. And as you blow that air in, I want you to look out the corner of your eye. You're going to see the chest rise. You see the chest rise, you just gave him an effective rescue breath, and you're going to give him oxygen. It's basically what you're going to do, get to that brain. And with rescue breathing, it's 2 breaths to start, and it's 1 breath every 5 seconds. And you do the best you can to stick to the 5 seconds, but the most important part is getting oxygen in the body and oxygen to that brain. Right? So I'm going to start doing rescue breathing on this person here. I'm going to do it for about 5 minutes. It's about 60 rescue breaths. And 911's still not here, and I just remembered I have Narcan in my car. I want to go grab that Narcan. And I got to leave this person alone. And so what we want to do, we never leave somebody who's experiencing an overdose on their backs. A lot of times with overdoses, they could be vomiting. If he's on his back, it's up, it's back, it's in his lungs. He's going to harden, he's going to aspirate. We're going to lose this person. So what we do is put him in a recovery position. Just looks like you're sleeping kind of on your side. And if you're going to put somebody in a recovery position, If he's laying down flat, I'm going to take his left arm, put it over his head. You'll remember the left arm because the heart's on that side. And I'm going to take that right leg and just start rolling him on his side. And you see in the picture up there, that right leg is bent. That knee wants to touch the ground. That's going to prevent him from rolling on his stomach and rolling on his back. And you take that right hand, just tuck it under his chin. Even if you leave him for 30 seconds, put him in a recovery position. It only takes 5 seconds to do. So I'm going to put him in this position. I'm going to run out there, get my Narcan. I'm going to lay him flat. First Narcan's going in. Peel, place, push. I got 3 minutes to wait. This guy's not breathing. I'm going to start doing rescue breaths during those 3 minutes. 3 minutes is up. Second Narcan goes in. Peel, place, push. Other nostril. And I'm going to continue to do this until he becomes responsive. I run out of Narcan. And if I do, I'm just going to keep breathing for him or until 911 shows up. Any questions about anything I talked about right there with those two scenarios? Okay. Good SAM law, I got to mention it. I always mention it in my trainings. Good SAM law is important. And the Good Samaritan law in Massachusetts basically says this: any person who acts in good faith to assist somebody in an overdose is protected. And you can see where you're protected here. And this goes for the victim, the responder, and everybody on the scene, right? Small amount, simple possession charge. If you have paraphernalia, under the influence, or have drugs, you'll not be arrested. If you administer Narcan to somebody who didn't want it, you acted in good faith, you're protected. You're also protected from doing rescue breathing and chest compressions. Where you're not protected, warrants. I see this on the streets out here a lot. When it comes to warrants, that's not my concern. My concern is saving lives out here. So if I have somebody out here in the streets who does have a warrant, this is what we tell them to do. Call 911, give them the exact location of where you are. If you have Narcan, hit them with a Narcan, throw them in the recovery position, and get the heck out of there. That's the best thing you could do to try to help this person, but not subject yourself to any kind of law enforcement at that time. It's better than not calling 911 or doing anything. At least you give this person a shot. If everybody shows up, there's lots of drugs, large amounts, everybody's going to jail. You're not protected here. It's a simple possession charge. And really, if this overdose occurs in an apartment or residence where children are present, DCF will be called that night. And this is important, and I'm all for protecting children, but I'm going to give you an example of what happened about 2 years ago. I got a call from DCF. There was a mom, and mom started dating a new boyfriend. She had no idea this guy was doing drugs. He was really good at hiding his addiction. Mom works 2 jobs, has 5 kids. She had 5 kids. 5 kids, good mom, 2 jobs. And he overdosed in her apartment. She called 911. They saved him. They Narcaned him, brought him back, but they took all her kids away. And so that's why I get called from DCF. And I was with her for about an hour and a half, and I really felt bad for her. And I think the point of this story is that be cognizant of who's in your home and what they're doing. And certainly if you have children, because you don't want to subject yourself to DCF involvement because of that. But again, sometimes they hide that addiction pretty well. So again, this gives you an idea where you're protected, where you're not protected. And that is basically going to conclude my training here tonight. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything like that. I'll be happy to take any questions you might have. It's a quiet room in here. You learned everything you knew? Go ahead.
I was just, when would you start CPR? That's a whole different thing. It seems like there'd be a fine line between, they're still conscious or unconscious. Is that, that's a whole other,
I think,
just hope.
and the way I usually train folks is, again, this comes from the Mass Department of Public Health. So we're training like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, right? And I try to do my best assessment, what I think is the best thing to do here. And if you know CPR, and you've been trained and you know what you're doing, I say have at it. You can do the whole thing. Chest compressions, the whole idea. Again, I think it comes down to that they have a pulse. Are they breathing, not breathing, that kind of thing. But again, a lot of the folks that I train are they don't know CPR, and certainly on the streets out here today. Go ahead.
Who invented Narcan?
Who invented Narcan? It's a great question right there. Anybody know that answer?
Me.
I do know who invented Narcan. His name is Jack Fishman. And I think everybody should Google this later on because it's kind of a sad story in a sense. Jack Fishman invented Narcan. He was actually looking for a cure for constipation for folks who were given morphine in the hospital, and he developed Narcan and to help with the constipation. Jack Fishman invented it, but he fell on hard times, and he sold the patent to Narcan. Big Pharma picked it up, and he never got the credit for what Narcan became. This is back in the late 70s. And what's really ironic and really kind of sad to me about it is that his son actually died of an overdose in 2011. which is, so the inventor of Narcan, you know, lost his son to an overdose, and he never gets the credit for what he did here, so I think it's important. You know, really, go back to those statistics, too, with the United States. You know, last year, we were up 30% in overdose deaths in the country. Massachusetts, 5.8%. Anybody know the #1 state with the most overdose deaths increase?
Vegas?
Nope. It's in New England.
Maine.
Vermont. Vermont was up 69% in overdose deaths. It's the biggest increase in the country. Massachusetts ranks about 17 when they rank out those things, but this is an epidemic as far as I'm concerned. You're losing over 100,000 folks a year, up 30% of the prior. COVID didn't help us out here. It didn't help us out, but also I think just the presence of fentanyl in everything drug-related today is what makes this so scary. And certainly, you know, I want to do what I can on the streets today, but we got to start thinking prevention-wise. And from a parental standpoint, I mean, to think that kids won't be exposed to drugs at some point in their life, I think it's kind of naive. These drugs are everywhere, and we just hope that if they are, you know, they are exposed at some point, that, you know, hopefully it's not a bad day. It's a good day to make a good choice right there. But I think at some point everybody's going to be exposed to some drugs in one form or another, and you just can't trust what you're getting out here. Certainly at a street level, and certainly on an internet level, nobody has a clue what we're buying out here. So very, very scary stuff out here. But name of the game, you got to keep them alive out here. Okay, go ahead.
So it sounds like the most important part of this is having the Narcan on you.
Yeah.
Besides frisking down a person or seeing it laid out, how do we find it?
How do we find Narcan? Oh, it's a great question. And I should have mentioned this too. Lots of ways to get Narcan here today, right? Standing order at just about every pharmacy. I think this is kind of an antiquated way of getting Narcan today. If you have Mass Health, it's typically free, $3.65 copay. If you have not Mass Health insurance, it's anywhere from $25 to $200 for a Narcan. I think it's outrageous. I don't want to see anybody pay for Narcan. We have free Narcan. To get Narcan today in Fitchburg, one of our great partners out here, Restoration Recovery Center, they do amazing work up there. They have Narcan. You can go up there anytime and see them. They're open Monday through Friday, I think. Is that right, Larissa? Yes. Monday through Friday, and they'll be happy to give you Narcan up there. On the streets out here today, I mean, my cards are up front there, too. I'm happy to drop Narcan off to anybody who needs it. And really, Narcan works. We put it in the hands of the folks who are actively using and the friends and family that surround them. That's how we save lives out here. And so if anybody needs Narcan, please take a card up there. I could drop it at your house like an Amazon delivery. You won't even, just tell me where to put it, and I'll drop it. And I want to make sure everybody has Narcan. And certainly, when I do deal with a lot of families sometimes. And usually the first thing I say to a family who's just finding out about an addiction is get Narcan. I don't even care what the drug we're doing is, because we have to assume that there's fentanyl in every drug out here. So I think the best place to start is having Narcan. And again, you got to keep them alive. That's the name of the game. Any other questions? Go ahead.
What do you think about the legalization of marijuana? Do you think that's contributed to, the drug scene at all?
Good question. I don't know. I'm not necessarily convinced it is. We do see lots of reports about fentanyl, marijuana laced with fentanyl. In everything that I've read online, and again, when I see these reports come, I go to Mass Department of Public Health, I go to BSES, I'm looking for information, is this really relevant? And from what I can understand is, fentanyl in marijuana typically is with, when it's in a THC oil, is when it usually can lead to an overdose there. Sprinkling fentanyl on say, a joint, when it's combusted, when it reaches the flame, the fentanyl vaporizes. So it really, you're killing the fentanyl with the flame. But if it's in a THC oil, it's usually what I've read. And again, I'm just what I've seen on the internet. But we see lots of things on TV, lots of reports in the media out here. Somebody came in contact with fentanyl. They touched it, and they overdosed. And again, this is a myth that's out there. If that was the case, everybody on the streets out here would just be rubbing it on their skin instead of injecting or snorting or smoking it. Could you overdose from skin? I think you would need a very, very large amount. And certainly even from an inhalation, if there's a ton of Narcan in the air and you were to breathe that in, I think there is some level of risk. But accidental, just touching a little bit of Narcan, there is no proof that causes an overdose. But I think it gets sensationalized in the media a little bit. So, Dan, I don't know if I answered your question there, but I don't know.
We see these dispensaries all over the place. I think the reason why most people are hitting the drugs now is it's a mental health issue. Nobody's addressed it. You're treating the side effects instead of treating the issue to start. Anything can be addicting. Video games, sex, cough medicine, whatever it is.
Good point.
You're not addressing the core of the issue. You're just treating the side effects.
Yeah.
And nobody's above it. Nobody.
Yeah.
Big money, little money, there's always at least 5 in every family.
Yeah. I just don't know if it necessarily it made it worse because of legalization of the marijuana. These overdoses have been happening. Fentanyl hits the scene in say 2013, 2014. That's when it hits the scene. It really starts to come on the radar. And by 2016, 17, that's where you see the spike out here. Everybody spiked, and these overdose deaths went through the roof, and it caught everybody's attention. So I feel like this was a problem before they were legalized. And it's certainly gotten worse, but I think it's just there's so much drugs coming into this country, you can't even stop it if we wanted to. And so how do we protect ourselves out here? You just get educated and you hope for the best sometimes, certainly with addiction, because addiction is tough. It destroys families. It rips them apart. It's hard. We want to do everything we can to try to help that person, but at the end of the day, we can't do it for them. And it's always enable and support. I mean, it's a fine line between enabling and supporting that individual. And I see this a lot with moms and dads who struggle with their children who are addicted. How do you find that fine line between enabling and supporting that person? It's very difficult, very, very difficult. We've got a lot of programs out here today. My favorite's Learn to Cope. I've done like several trainings for Learn to Cope, from Worcester to Gardner. And I just think it's a great organization because you got a lot of families, a lot of moms and dads there who have been through it, are going through it, or just have a lot of experience. And so I think it's very helpful for a lot of families to connect with an agency like that. Any other questions about anything? Perfect. So anybody who wants Narcan here tonight, I have plenty of Narcan in my bag. Happy to give it to you. If you have a loved one, a friend or family, what I really want is Narcan in that person's hands. Get it into the person with the addiction or the friends and family that surround them. But if you have you have a couple people that could use this Narcan here tonight, feel free. Take a couple kits here, no problem. It's all free. You go see Kimmy over here, and she will give you all the Narcan you have. And any other questions? If there's no other questions, I'm going to wrap this thing up for you. So I want to thank everybody for coming out here tonight. I do appreciate it. And feel free to stop by and see us, grab some Narcan, and have a good night and drive safe. Thank you. Thank you.